What would you say to your 12-year-old self? This simple yet profound question has sent me on a journey back to childhood to find healing for today. I'm Mike Nicholson, a lifelong educator with over 25 years devoted to young minds. I'm here to celebrate those dedicated to the service of young people and to delve into how they navigate their personal healing amidst the childhood pain they witness in their daily lives. Together, we forge actionable steps to kickstart the healing journey for the young people of today. Join me as I speak with teachers, mental health professionals, coaches, and more, and uncover the wisdom they would share with their 12-year-old selves. Together, we strive to build a foundation for healing that many of us never had. So what would you say to your 12-year-old self? Special note before starting, this podcast is in no way intended to take the place of any kind of mental health assistance. We are simply having discussions about healing and learning and growing. If you need mental health attention, please seek a professional. Hello, and welcome back to your 12-year-old self. Today I welcome Lorraine Connell as my guest. Lorraine is an experienced educator with over 2 decades of teaching high school students, during which she honed her skills in peer mentoring over 5 years. Specializing in social and emotional learning, she developed an innovative curriculum aimed at enhancing empathy, self-confidence, problem-solving, and decision-making skills crucial for effective leadership among young adults. Her commitment to sustainability led her to pioneer programs utilizing a train-the-trainer model, fostering leadership development within schools and organizations. Drawing from her personal experiences of overcoming self-doubt and fear of failure, Lorraine's coaching approach is marked by authenticity and relatability. She creates a nurturing environment where teens can explore leadership roles without the fear of making mistakes, emphasizing that growth often arises from setbacks. By openly sharing her own imperfections and modeling vulnerability, she inspires teens to embrace their innate leadership abilities and recognize their potential for impact beyond the classroom. Lorraine Connell, welcome to your 12-year-old self. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited. I've been following your content, reading your website and what you're about, and I love it, and I can't wait for people to hear about it because you key on leadership, and there's something that you say often, and we'll get into it, is about people don't realize they are leaders, or especially like young people, and
Yes.
it's just something about it really just hit a nerve, a good one. So anyway, let's start the way I always start. Tell me about your life at 12 years old.
Well, I was listening to some of your other episodes and I was thinking to myself, what was I doing at 12? And luckily, I have a 13-year-old son, so I was able to identify what grade he's in, and that really helped me figure out what I was doing at 12. So 12 was about 6th grade. We had gone from our little elementary school to a big middle school that had brought together many, many, many elementary schools. So it was really, really a game changer for me. I struggled a lot in all of middle school. So yes, it started at 12, but really I just wanted to be friends with people. I wanted people to like me. I just wanted everybody to be happy and connect and be themselves. And we talked a little bit about vulnerability before we started recording, and there was no vulnerability in middle school. And I distinctly remember some of the challenges that I had in middle school was around friendship. And I didn't really know what friendship was. And so I kept really chasing a group of people. I think I wanted to be in that in crowd or that popular group. And so I was doing all sorts of things to be seen, I think. And so I can remember distinctly when my group of friends, and I don't think we were that big, but maybe 4 or 5 of us were in a group, and when somebody would get mad at somebody else in the group, I was the first person to apologize. And I remember not ever really doing anything, but I was so apologetic and I was so like, I'm so sorry. I don't want this to happen. And so I took on that persona of being a mistake and making mistakes and causing conflict. And so I think it's been a long time since I've revisited those feelings, but I think there's a lot of what I'm doing now that goes and hits that little girl a lot in the work that I'm doing.
Ding, ding, ding. You just nailed exactly what we're doing here. The question I have for you then is, because I was your vice principal for a long time,
Hmm.
right? Of that kid, of that group of
Right.
girls where there's probably relational aggression and things like that. Um, why were you like that? So it sounds to me, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I trust me, I feel it.
Yes.
You were this for lack of a better term, you were the peacekeeper. Like for some reason you
Yes.
felt the need, and it sounds like you internalized all of that, for lack of a better term, drama. But for you, it
Yes.
was trauma, probably. You internalized that to try to, was it the purpose to try to fix the group, to fix the problem?
Probably initially that was my intent so that we were uniform, but I don't think anybody else had that purpose. It was fun. I think it was enjoyable in some way or another for the queen bee and 2.0. But for me, it was like when there was conflict and there was disconnection between people in the group, it was drama, yes. And there was like pods, right? This person was talking about this person. And then I would like try and facilitate. And it was all about that, like who was talking about who. And it, it was traumatic. And I think I didn't realize, yes, peacemaker is what I would define myself,
Okay.
but I didn't know that's what I was doing.
What? But again, I guess my question is why? And the reason I ask that is
Mm,
because for me, I'm obsessed with every bit of content I get from some trauma coach or whatever that explains to me the decisions I make and how they come from trauma when I was a child, right? So the reason
hmm.
I asked, and I'm not saying you had trauma at your house, I have no idea, but like the one that jumps out at me is this idea that like if you're somebody who is always apologizing or always trying to fix things, it's because you might have had trauma as a child and we're constantly navigating that in order to make your life more bearable. So I'm just wondering if
Yeah.
if you've ever thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a pretty happy home. My dad was a working dad, so he was gone a lot. And as he is a grandfather now, he's like, I missed so much of your lives. And, but that I don't think was it. For me, it was insecurity that if I left this drama situation, I didn't have anywhere else to go, right? So it was this like, I latched onto this group. This group brought me in, I think because I was an easy target. I wanted to like make everybody happy. And I was not only the peacekeeper, but then I really did create more drama because I was trying to bring everybody together. I think I was feeding the conversations
Yes.
and just getting in it. And then that made me feel valuable, and that is how I felt value. And yes, how much does that impact me now? It took me a long time to decide that I was worthy of anything, right? So for me, it came out a lot in money. I don't have enough. I don't have enough. I never once struggled for money, but I always felt like there was never enough. And that's that feeling of lack of abundance, that scarcity. And when I dug down deep into it, the scarcity was because I didn't think I was enough. And that trauma, that drama between those girls, that was it.
Interesting. Interesting. So I'm getting trauma thinking about my days as a middle school VP, because this was my entire life working with guidance counselors to figure out the relational aggression. And we probably would have pinpointed you as like, we got to get this girl away from them because she's just making it worse.
Yes, she is. But she didn't know she was making it
Yes.
worse. It was all coming from a place of trying to be seen and valued. And I think often the peacemakers are looking for that place where they belong, and they're not doing it with the right intention. They don't know why they're doing it.
So were you looking, and I asked this for a personal reason, were you looking, and I'm still trying to figure out your role, were you looking for connection in any way? Like in that, like, so was it the value of being the peacekeeper? Was the value we're getting as being part of one of those groups that broke up and you connected with those other girls in a way that was like the only thing that connected you was the for lack of a better term, the hatred that day for the other group?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a lot of those things. I think I wanted to be a part of a group. And if the group was the outs group, then I was part of that group. If the group was the in group, I was part of the in group. And so I never had a place except in the middle, and I felt like a ping pong. And so I was like, okay, so I'm the ping pong. I will be the news keeper, and I will be the one who always takes on the problem. It's our fault. It's my fault. Let me fix it. And wow, it's been a long time since I really dug into those feelings
Man, that
of
sounds
why did
exhausting.
I do that? It was.
It sounds exhausting. And I will say, I'm not surprised. Like when I went into teaching, when I went into, I taught at high school for a long time, much like you. And then I went to administration in a middle school. And when I sat down with a 12-year-old girl or seventh grade girl, I kid you not when I say I never encountered a more alien being in my
Mm-hmm.
life. I didn't have kids of my own yet. And I was like, I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth. And I mean that. And at the same time, I knew they didn't know it was coming out of their mouth next. It's just,
No.
it's a lot. So that just sounds exhausting. We'll move on from you being 12 because we're both getting exhausted. So did you find your way in high school then? Like you clearly were looking for your way in middle school, like everybody is. Did you find a different way? Did you find a
Hmm.
more non-toxic uh, group or a non-toxic way to go about surviving or living or
Yes, I think, well, here's the thing. So we had all of these elementary schools feed into this. Well, there were two middle schools, and for some reason, my middle school split again. So my group of quote unquote friends went to the other high school, and I went to a different high school. So I had to find new friends. And I think, it took me a while to find my place, but it was a more comfortable place in high school. I think I found a little bit more security in who I was. Not a ton. I think I was still pretty insecure of who was a real friend and who was um, friend by convenience. And I had a lot of interests in high school. I played volleyball, I did orchestra, and there were different groups that did those things. So I was connected to a lot of different people.
I have a question. Something you just said really struck me. You said you were insecure about the friendships. Who was a real like? Were you conscious of it at that time?
No,
Okay, okay.
no, I think, 45-year-old me can look back and look at the habits and look at the behaviors and say, I don't think Lorraine knew what friendship was. And I still, as a 45-year-old, I still don't know if I know what friendship really is. It's been a struggle for a long time in my life. I had as a teacher, when I worked at a place for 18 years, I had great friends, but then I left that school and it's been really hard to stay friends with those
Isn't that
colleagues.
so weird when you can make work friends like that? Like you
Yeah.
think you share so much and like so much, like 18 years you've dealt with marriages, divorces, deaths in the family, all
Oh,
these things. And like you were all there for each other. And there were days where you had a terrible day and one of your work friends made sure they were there for you and vice versa. And then you leave and you're like, well, what was that? You know, when you and I get that so much, but I think for me, I think it's like I just think you're given who you need at that time. That's the way I look at it. You know,
yeah.
if you live your life, you know, I always say the universe will provide for you, right? Whatever
Hmm.
you, if you're putting it out there, you're going to get what you need from the universe, right? So, and you can look at those 18 years and say, oh man, it's a shame I don't have my friends anymore. But you could also look back and go, man, I had great friends for 18 years. And
Yeah.
that was wonderful, you know. It's easier for me to say because I still struggle and I have the same issues, and I still think about friendships that have gone wrong, and so it's interesting. So did you go to college to become a teacher? Was that your plan?
No, I went to college to save the world.
Oh,
It was
that's
the
it.
90s. It was the 90s, so it was reduce, reuse, recycle. And many of those same themes came through again in college. I struggled to find a group that I belonged in. I still played volleyball. I had to quit playing the violin, so I was not in an orchestra. Um, I pledged a sorority and I got invited into two different sororities, and one was more popular than the other, and I chose them. And it took me one semester to realize that I didn't belong in that sorority. And I did something that I didn't even know was possible, but I deactivated. And I tell students, when I was teaching kids, I tell them that you need to find your people and not try and be somebody you're not, which is exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to be seen as somebody that I knew I wasn't, but I wanted other people to see me as that person. And so I think middle school started, high school I still tried, but I had like a better environment to do that. But college was pretty toxic.
Wow. Okay. It's just so interesting to hear all this because I guess I'm wondering at what point, like, there's the theme is you were looking for a group at all every step of the way. You were looking for a group that Lorraine fit into,
Yes.
and but you don't recall that that's what you were doing at that time.
Never. Mm-mm.
And I guess we're all doing it, right? We're always looking for connection. And um, wow, okay. So did you find after you deactivated from the sorority, did you find your people?
I think I did actually. It coincided at the same time I did a semester abroad. And at that semester, I mean, I was there with those people for 3 months. I met three incredible women. They were young ladies at the time. And two were in my wedding. Two I'm still connected to. We live on different places in America, but I, I, I spend more time thinking about them and connecting with them than I do with anybody that I grew up with at any age besides my wonderful sister, who is my best friend.
That's amazing. You know,
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. And you know what's interesting is that, and I don't know if it's reality, but I can pinpoint a moment in my life where I found myself, and it was surrounded by travel. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And I don't know if you've thought about that. If that's, you know,
No.
you went, man, I'm pretty badass. I can travel at this age without my family. And it was like, I remember for me, it was much later in life. Um, when I look back at that moment, I was like, man, I did a lot of things that I would have been afraid to do before that, because people would have thought this, people would have thought that. Those people that I'm trying to impress and connect with, and I look and it's just interesting that travel was a part of that for you. I just find that interesting.
Well, and I often think about your life as a young person. You're in kind of a cohort of people. Some people come, some people go. You're not really making new friends. You're not in this exposed place where you know no one and no one knows anyone. There's one time in our lives that that happens, and that's college, going to college, right? That freshman year, we all come in as brand new students. It is the only time in our lives where that happens, except if you go study abroad. And if you study abroad, there's a cohort of people who come together from all different places and you meet. Those moments are defining moments for people. Like, never again are you the a new person with a bunch of other new people, right? You think of getting your first job. The people there already know each other. You think of moving. Wherever you move, people already know each other. You think of starting a master's program. There's like people are coming in and out at different points in that program. So I've really spent a lot of time thinking about that. There's really no other time that that happens.
It sounds like you spend a lot of time thinking about human connection in general.
I do.
Like that is so prevalent, like in everything you're saying, and I love it because I think human connection is so important. But like, I hope that you're not lamenting anything. Like I hope that you go, look, doesn't matter. I have one great friend, and that's enough. I hope that's where you are now.
Well, I think, it's so funny that we're talking about this because my sister and I just went away for a girls' weekend and we were talking about friendship. And I was like, I don't know if I ever truly had a real friend in many of my experiences. And it came up because when I was 17, I was diagnosed with diabetes and I was going into my senior year in high school, and I had 1 year under my parents' roof to figure out how to live with this new life. And then I went to college, and in therapy, we realized that like that was pretty traumatic. And I have shoved that down. I have not thought about that experience. I'm always like, oh no, I'm great. I handle my diabetes really well. I've been really, really good about it. But then my therapist like unveiled this and I was like, oh,
But what did you unveil in that? I'm
interesting.
very curious because I it was it just it because it was so life altering at a very formative age. Is that what the trauma was? Like what?
It was the fact that when you go to college, you're really just trying to figure out who you are, right? And so I went to college. I didn't know who I was anymore at all. My baseline had been totally erased. And I had never lived on my own with these challenges. And I really needed support. And nobody, not to the fault of their own, but nobody in my orbit had the capacity to be a helper for me because they were just trying to figure out themselves at
Yeah.
that age. Right. So I
I,
needed a support system and I couldn't tap into the people who would have normally been my support system.
yeah, there was no diabetes club to join. Yes. um, there might be now. You never know how much
Right.
college has
Who
changed.
knows?
That's so amazing. So, what did you major in then? What were you planning to do when with
Yeah.
college?
Environmental science. So, I thought if I did that, I would be able to jump into saving the earth and figuring that out. It was my sophomore year, and I was taking chemistry 101 because in science you have to take all of that. And I realized at that moment that it was the chemistry that I was very much in in love with. But it wasn't chemistry. It was the teacher that I had. It was the teacher I had in my sophomore year in college and the teacher I had in my senior year in high school when I took a second year of chemistry. And so I minored in chemistry. I graduated college. I could not find a job that would pay me to save the world. They wouldn't pay me to do that. And if I could,
Oh my
they were
God.
few and far between. And so, everything happens for a reason. I got a job working for a consulting firm that was like, we do phase ones where they just like assess buildings. And I met my husband there. So it was like, it was meant to be. But it was about 3 years into that profession that I was like, this is the opposite of what I want to be doing. And so I was like, okay, what else can I do? And that's when the chemistry came back for me. And I was like, what about teaching? And so, yeah, so that was how teaching became part of my professional life.
And then again, I'll go back to the universe. That wasn't the right spot for you, but you met your husband, right? Like
Exactly. Exactly.
it's amazing. And that's another thing. It's taken me a long time. I'm still trying to figure out is no matter what happens, it's okay. Like
Yes.
if you didn't die from it, or nobody was hurt from it, you're gonna be okay. And that's very late in
Yeah.
life. I'm coming to that, but that's amazing. So I guess you taught chemistry then in high
I
school.
did. I did. I loved it so, so much.
Awesome. I guess what I want to know is, did the peacekeeper come with you into the high school?
I don't think she did. I think she went away for a little while. I mean, I was a people pleaser, but I was no longer a peacekeeper because I couldn't keep the peace the way I did when I was in school. The
Yeah.
peace was now within those groups, and I wasn't part of those groups. I was involved with those groups, but they weren't my people anymore.
Right.
So I I said yes to a lot of things. I kept the perfectionism. I was still very, very in tune with like if I just try hard enough, I can be perfect, and it is something that I will eventually achieve if I just work hard enough.
That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, especially as a teacher. It's like there's
Yeah,
no there's so many variables, like 30 variables every 45 minutes, right? Like perfection is
right.
never happening.
But in reflecting back, I realized that by being such a perfectionist as a teacher, I made it really hard for my students to know that mistakes were okay. And I was like all about like make mistakes in my class, make mistakes. Here are these resources. Like my whole job, chemistry was the vehicle, but my whole purpose of being a teacher was to tell kids that they could do hard things because I don't think I ever knew that I was allowed to do hard things. And if I misstepped or if I failed or if I made a mistake, it would be okay.
I think that's so important. That whole concept, what you just said. Uh, I It's something that I don't think is valued enough in
Mm-mm.
schools. I think, especially recently, I guess really ever since No Child Left Behind, um,
Yes.
but like everything's about testing and things like that, which there is no margin for error, right? And we all know that testing just tests socioeconomic status, doesn't test anything else. And I did relish that. Like I put TV and film production in high school, and I taught English. But the way I was able to, I, that idea of being able to tell young people that it's okay to make mistake, and not only that, like there's ways around it, right? Like and when they that's why I really connect with what you're saying, because I relished that. students came to my class and they were doing something they were never normally doing, and they were thinking differently. They were problem solving, and they were always finding a way to. There's always a way to fix something, and I just loved it, loved it. And then I also found that as I got older and became an administrator, and I was a hothead of an administrator sometimes, that the value in apologizing to young people as well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I will tell on Instagram or wherever, like I will often say the best way you can make a connection with your teenager is to admit you've made a mistake or to accept responsibility for something that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I
again, that perfectionism comes in as a parent, right? I'm their superhero. Superheroes don't make mistakes. They are perfect. And yet, if I don't make mistakes and share them with my children, they're not going to know it's okay to make mistakes in our house.
Yeah. And it's okay to just be human. Like for me, when I was an administrator and I would lose my cool, I would call the kid in the next day. I would
Mm,
try to anyway, and say,
yeah.
"Man, I go, I just you deserve an apology. You're a human being, and I lost my cool. I'm a human being too, and I knew there was more value in that than anything. In the meantime, I'm trying not to lose my cool. Like I'm trying to work on that because I don't think anybody should be yelling. And you know what I mean? And just human, we can't help it sometimes. So, all right. So you teach for 18 years,
Hmm.
and then is how do you get from that to your company that you have, which is I have so many questions about because there's just things when I was reading your website. How do you go? Tell me how you go from teaching to that, and tell me about that. Peers, not
Yeah.
fears. Yeah,
Yep.
love
Yeah.
it.
Because there's so much, and you'll go back to that 12-year-old. There's so much fear amongst our peers that I want to make it so community is built on peer relationships and not the fears that we have around our peers. So that's how the name came about. I evolved into this leaving teaching and starting my own business in a complicated way. I would say it was probably 10 years into my teaching career where I was like, what else can I do here? Like, I know there's more that I can do, but I was innovating in my classroom, but I wasn't being able to like take it one step further. And I definitely did not want to be an administrator. I didn't want to be an administrator. They did have like the subject leader, and that was like the science department head. We stayed in that position until somebody wanted to leave. And so for the first 10 years, it was the same person, and they were wonderful. The position became available. I applied for the position. There was a much better candidate. One of my dearest friends was the candidate, and I didn't get it. So there was that first reminder that I didn't have a title. So I didn't have a title. I'm not a leader. It came open again. I applied again. Again, another fantastic colleague. I worked with some incredible teachers at the school that I worked at, and I didn't get it. So I was again reminded. And I said to myself, I remember it was like 15 years in, I'm just a teacher. And I really felt like that wasn't enough. And so I'm 15 years in, I'm looking at myself like, what else can I do? And an opportunity fell into my lap. It was the first colleague who left the science department chair, left the school completely. And one of the classes he had was called peer leadership. And he said, I recommended you for that job. And I think he knew that I had applied or asked to be added into that class, but it was a class that they just assigned people. So it wasn't like you could apply or express interest. They just gave it to whomever didn't have a class, right? And so he recommended me for it. I taught it for 3 years, and I will never say that I taught that class. I advised those students, and we had an application process. Kids applied and kids didn't apply. And that was curious to me. Why weren't they applying? And then the second thing was, I think it was my first year as the advisor of that class. one of my students made a mistake, a pretty big one. It was new to vaping, and they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, or they were engaged in the vaping activity. I wasn't there. I don't know. But they decided that this individual would be removed from peer leadership, removed from National Honor Society, removed from the sports that they were on, because this kid was a role model, and role models can't show other kids that it's okay to do these things. And I know you're shaking your head, but
Well, it's just
I
I'm
was,
shaking my head at the thought of it, and I'm also thinking about you because this is you, right? Like
this was
not that
me, right?
you're out there vaping, but like this is like probably a watershed moment for you, so to speak, like because you were fighting this idea of perfection and then you
Yeah,
saw it happen. That's why I'm shaking my head. Well, all of it, I think it's a lot to take from a young person, but I'm thinking about you.
right.
But go ahead.
And I realized between those two moments that not every kid was applying for these positions, and if we gave a student this position, they were put on a pedestal that they couldn't make a mistake on. And I said to this student at the time, I'm like, just admit what you did, take responsibility. And I'll never forget. They said, I feel like I'm in a hole and I just keep digging myself deeper, or somebody is digging the hole deeper and I can't get my footing. And at the time, I was like, that is so short sighted. But when I think about it now, they were a teenager. They were going to make a mistake. I didn't give that student a hand
That's
to figure
exactly
out
what I was just going
how
to
to
say.
change.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Of course, the kid feels in their hole because no one's putting their hand down in that hole to help them.
Right. And
You
in
know?
fact, we were burying that kid
Yep.
because we needed them to be this example. And so, yes, it was me, because this child was not perfect. I knew that other kids saw these mistakes and said, "Well, I don't make that mistake. I make all these little mistakes. There's no way I can be a leader." So that's where the three myths of leadership came out for me. Leaders are perfect. That's one myth. Leaders have a title. That's the other myth. And that leaders are born leaders. It's not a skill you develop. So all three of those myths prevent every young person and adults from seeing themselves as a leader.
Amazing. That's amazing. I, that story just the thought of that young person just being like there was all negative, right? There was no
Yes.
it's like not what can we do for this person? It's what can we do to this person? And
Well, and I will tell you that I reached out to them a couple years ago because I knew that at the time that I had made the wrong decision. And I asked them, I said, what do you take away from that? And they said, I'm still upset. I saw myself as a failure. I learned that mistakes are not, you can't make a mistake. And if you do your best to hide it. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I taught you. That's exactly what the message we send to these kids when they make a mistake like that.
wow.
There's no
What
way out.
wow, that's so it's first of all, the fact you reached out, like the way the way I'm hearing from you, how much you internalize so much of these things, right? Like that you have for a long time. You know, everything is about peers and like it's been a part of you the whole time. Like
Yes.
what am I
Yeah.
going to do to fit in with my peers? Now what am I going to do to help people not fear their peers? Like that is really interesting. And I'm so angry for I'm not saying it's you, like you had support for your administration to do whatever you needed to do, but I always think of, and I use this at another interview. I always think of Monsters Inc. And
Mm-hmm.
in Monsters Inc., they have their whole thing is we're going to make kids cry, and that's going to give us energy, right? But then by
Mm-hmm.
the end, they realize no, we're going to get more energy from laughing. And I can't not think about that when I think about this. Like, this is what we do in schools, right?
Yeah.
We know that we know that and as people, as individual people, we need to be helping form citizens and just decent people, critical thinkers, and we would any individual kid would give a hand up to. So Lorraine, I could talk to you all day about all of these things, but I really want to hear about. You just told me about these three myths. It sounds like they were a little germ of a seed for your idea for your company and how you're working with kids. So can you tell me about what um, Peers Not Fears does and what you do?
Yeah, so what I do is my hope is that I reach kids before they get to their junior year in high school. So I'm looking at middle school through sophomore year in high school. We meet as a virtual cohort, 15 students tops. Once I hit 15, we move into a new cohort with a new group of students. I'm hoping that these kids are coming from all different areas in the communities, so they don't necessarily know the people that they're joining. And we talk about leadership. We I right now it's just me, but I have a vision where it's going to be lots of the kids who go through my program will come back and run their own cohort, because that is the vision that I have, is that you learn from me what you've learned, you then apply it. And we do activities, so challenging activities, like when you meet somebody, what do you say? I want you to spend 3 or 4 days observing what you say. And then the second set of that is try and change it up. Because I don't know about you, Mike, but I often will say fine when somebody asks me how I'm doing. I will also, when I see somebody for the first time, I'll say, oh, hey, how are you doing? Every single time. Those are the two things that happen to me. And so I'm asking students to spend some time observing how they interact with people and then coming back and saying, okay, that's what I say all the time. Here, I'm going to try and change this up. And I, when we're finally finished and we come back and we talk about it, we say, well, what did you learn? Well, I had a really hard time changing up what I say. And why is that a problem? And we talk about the mistakes that they may or may not have made. And at the end of that cohort, 4 months, they have a wealth of ideas of ways that they are leaders. They have a support system within that new community that they've created. They have the confidence to lead something on their own. And they have me as a support system forever. And so I just love it so much because we are all leaders, and the only thing keeping us from being a leader is knowing that we're a leader. And the only requirement that we need to be a leader is that make a decision. And your audience is listening to this podcast right now. They've already made a decision. We get up in the morning, we've made a decision. We're leading, whether it's leading ourselves or a larger group, we're leading all the time.
That's amazing. I can't tell you how much I love that. I've never heard of anything like it. I think it is it's a unique way, but such an amazing way to go about building confidence in young people, right?
And it's simple.
It's so simple. So these cohorts, are these like students that are doing it like their families have kind of like signed them up and for a 4 month cohort and it's like done at night or something like that? Wow, that's amazing.
Well, you also have to remember that as parents, we want the world for our kids. And so a parent's going to say, oh my gosh, so and so, you need to sign up for this cohort. And they're going to say, no thanks, mom. Why are you telling me to do this? I already do enough. And so what I do is I invite parents and teens to an info session so they can see why I'm doing this. I'm also on Snapchat and TikTok so that the teens can find me and follow me and say, oh, okay, she's not something that my mom just wants me to do. They can buy in, because if they're not going to buy in,
Mm-hmm.
a parent's going to drop the $500 or whatever I'm charging at the time, and the kid's like, okay, I'm just going to put in the hour, and we meet virtually. So it's 1 hour every 2 weeks for 4 months. So it's about 8 sessions And the best part about it is that they're learning from each other. I'm just facilitating the conversation.
This gets me so excited. Like, I just love it. I love it, love it, love it so much. I just love it. I just love young people learning from one another. The value that comes from a student being a teacher, so to speak, is invaluable. God, I love it. I love that you're doing that. So I hope you, whatever. I think it's wonderful. I think it's really wonderful.
I have a free resource for parents, so they can go to my website and it's 10 ways to ignite your teen leadership. And honestly, my hope is that they get that download and they're like, oh, my kid's doing that, my kid's doing that, they're already a leader. That's awesome. So let's just elevate them a little more. So it's like kind of that awareness, but also here are some other tips and tricks you can do to get them to lead.
I love it. And it's a perfect segue into my final question. Mainly that you're still, I'm going to ask you to say what you would say to your 12-year-old self, but all I can think is that you are still serving that little girl.
I created Peers Not Fears for Lorraine at 12
That's
to
amazing.
22. And what I would tell her is that the experiences and the trauma and the drama that you're experiencing right now is going to create an incredibly empathetic, kind, compassionate, driven person who is going to use this to create change for kids like you.
Wow, that's amazing, man! You were ready for that question. So then let me ask you this, because the other value I try to offer in this with this journey is, yes, it's great to hear what Lorraine would say to her 12-year-old self, because I think it's amazing. What advice can you give to parents or teachers or anybody who works with that 12-year-old or any 12-year-old to help them? And you said it before, to get to them, like to get to them early and say like what can we say to that kid? What advice do you give to parents?
Actually, it's nothing that I would tell them to say to their kid. The advice that I would give parents and teachers is to see yourself as a leader, because you are. Parents are the most important leaders in their children's lives. And if you're not making mistakes because you think you have to be perfect, then you're not leading the way you want your kids to grow up. Accept responsibility, try new things. All the things that you're doing as a parent is teaching your kid how to be a good leader. And if you don't think you're a leader, I didn't think I was a leader. So how could I expect my own children to think they would be leaders when all I wanted in the world was for them to be leaders? So I had to stop and reflect and say, you know what, Lorraine, you don't need a title to be a leader. You are a leader. You make decisions. You are leading your family. You are doing all of these things. How could I not see myself as a leader? So parents, especially teachers, you are incredible leaders. Start seeing yourself as a leader and everything will become a little bit easier in working with a 12-year-old child.
Lorraine Connell, thank you so much. This was a great conversation that I really enjoyed it, and I can honestly say to you, I'm a better person for this conversation. You know what I mean? Like I mean that. I mean that sincerely. It was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it. And I think I'm better for it as well, because I don't think I've spoken to that 12-year-old Lorraine in a really long time. And I think she really needed to hear what I just said.
Yeah, you haven't spoken to her. You've just been, everything in your life has been serving her. You just haven't said anything to her. So, all right. Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Special thanks once again to my guest, Lorraine Connell. All her information, her socials, her website, any way to contact her can be found in the show notes. Please don't forget to subscribe or rate the show or leave a comment or a review. Share with your friends. Anything that can get us to more ears would be greatly appreciated. Your 12-Year-Old Self is a Fairmount Media production, and it's hosted, written, and produced by me, Mike Nicholson. Questions, comments, guest suggestions can be emailed to your12yearoldself@gmail.com. That's your 12-year-old self with the number 12 at gmail.com. The theme song is Never a Worthless Moon by Yawns. Logo design by Rose Bear Arts. Digital marketing consulting by Krista Lemon. Social media consulting by Jessica Hawk. Special thanks to Ron Cornwall and Sarah Finney. And my profound gratitude goes out to my wife, Courtney.